Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Killer Bites, your favorite internet show where we cover some of the wildest true crime cases out there. Today is a really difficult story to cover as it involves a very young child by the name of Gabriel Fernandez. In 2020, Netflix released a documentary series called The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez. It takes an in-depth look at the horrors the 8-year-old boy suffered at the hands of his own parents and the lack of action from the Department of Child Services. So, without further ado, let's jump into today's case. Pearl Cynthia Fernandez was born on August 29, 1983. Growing up is not easy for Pearl as her home life was never stable or consistent. Her dad was always in and out of the prison system and her mother was physically abusive towards her. Pearl never felt like her mother loved or cared for her, and being hit only furthered that belief. So, at just 9 years old, Pearl turned to alcohol and methamphetamines as a way to cope with her unpredictable home life. When she turned 11, she ran away from home and in 8th grade, stopped attending school altogether. She dropped out and things got even worse. Pearl was taken advantage of by her uncle and was held a hostage by multiple men who used her body for sex over numerous days. These horrifying situations deeply affected her mental health. She checked into a hospital soon after and was diagnosed with multiple mental health issues such as PTSD, personality disorders, depressive disorder, and developmental disabilities. Pearl scored in the 3rd percentile of a cognitive ability test, meaning that she was the same level as a typical 2nd grade student. Pearl met a man named Arnold Contreras, and the two fell in love and quickly married. Unfortunately, their relationship was rocky and very abusive. Arnold was in and out of jail, which only furthered their troubles. Ultimately, the two split up because their abuse had gone too far. However, the two of them had 4 children together, including Gabriel, who today's case is about. Gabriel Daniel Fernandez was born on February 20th, 2005. 3 days after Pearl gave birth to Gabriel, she abandoned him at the hospital. It was clear from the very beginning that she had a great disdain for her son. Shortly after his birth, custody of Gabriel was given to his uncle, Michael Lemos Carranza, and his partner, David Martinez. They raised Gabriel for 4 years as if he was their own, and they loved him immensely. Sadly, due to blatant homophobia from Gabriel's grandparents, he was taken from this loving home. In 2009, Gabriel moved into his grandparents' house and lived with them until 2012. Everyone agreed that Gabriel was in better hands living with his close family and not with his mother, as she was clearly incapable of taking care of him and other children. Despite all this, Pearl regained custody of Gabriel in 2012. She claimed that she felt uncomfortable with kids being around her relatives and living in their homes. In reality, it might have just been another way to acquire welfare benefits. During this time, Pearl met a guy named Isaro Aguirre. Isaro moved on to a security position at AVL Private Security. It was there that he ended up meeting Pearl. And around a year and a half later, Gabriel moved into their house in Palmdale, California. Things took a significant downturn once Gabriel was back in the house with his mother and her new boyfriend. They enrolled him in a brand new school, and right away, Gabriel's teacher, Jennifer, could tell that things at home were not okay. Within weeks of Gabriel joining her classroom, he asked her, "Is it normal for moms to hit their kids? Is it normal to be hit with a belt buckle? And is it normal for you to bleed?" Obviously, when a kid makes statements like these, you have to take them seriously. Jennifer called the Los Angeles Child Abuse Hotline to report the comments and ensure someone knew what was happening. When the social worker came to the house, Gabriel was questioned with his mother present. There is no way a child will give you the details of his abuse in front of the woman responsible for it. He's not going to risk punishment for being honest. It's horrifying, but it's true. Over the next few months, Jennifer noticed that Gabriel's physical condition was getting worse and worse. Gabriel would show up to class with bruises, scars, and open wounds across his body and his face. In addition, Jennifer recalled seeing black eyes, busted lips, and bruises across his face and his arms. Gabriel put on a brave face at school even though he was being systematically tortured by his own mother and her boyfriend at home. Pearl and Isaro would take turns beating Gabriel with their hands and belts, specifically the buckle. The beatings would be so intense that they caused broken bones. Keep in mind that these are grown adults that are doing this to a boy who's no older than 8 years old. The couple forced Gabriel to eat expired food, but it got even worse. Gabriel would get sick from eating expired food and from being thrown around so much. Finally, he would throw up, and both Pearl and Isaro forced him to eat his own throw up. When they were bored of this, they forced him to eat cat litter and cat feces. Every single day, it was something new. Pearl and Isaro played out their sick torture on this tiny boy because they felt powerful. They would smoke and put out their lit cigarettes on his body. Then they took pepper spray and sprayed him in the face just to watch him suffer. If all of this isn't sick and twisted enough, they took BB guns and shot it into Gabriel's body and his face, specifically into his groin as well. They forced Gabriel to sleep in a small cupboard in the room that could barely fit him. Everyone could see that Gabriel was utterly disheveled at school. At this point, he was coming to school with large patches of hair pulled from his scalp. Some of his teeth were missing, and this was from having them knocked out with a baseball bat. But Gabriel was doing his best to hold it together. Despite the horrific abuse he was enduring at home, all he wanted was for his mother to love him. He wanted to be loved. Was that too much to ask for? Gabriel's teacher, Jennifer, asked him what had happened, and he replied that his mother and her boyfriend had taken a BB gun and shot at him. Again, Jennifer called the child abuse line to follow up on her previous claims. Social workers were called out to the house, but never interviewed Gabriel on his own. His mother was constantly present. Why? Why was this happening to Gabriel? He was a bright, sweet boy who only wanted his mother's love and approval. Why was she abusing him to such an extent? Apparently, Pearl and Isaro thought that Gabriel was gay. They witnessed him playing with dolls and expressing himself with feminine gestures. They were disgusted by his behavior. They forced Gabriel to wear women's clothes and would scream gay and other slurs at him while they beat him. Because of this, they felt justified in their horrendous torture of an 8-year-old boy. Gabriel's other siblings knew the kind of torture that their brother was going through, and they were having it done to them as well. However, they were never treated as badly as he was. They witnessed some of the beatings and repeatedly heard Pearl and Isaro call Gabriel gay as an insult. Multiple caseworkers were called to the home, but never saw anything indicating that things were as bad as Jennifer had said. They each claimed that the safety precaution measures that they had enacted with Pearl were going swimmingly and that there was no need to be alarmed. They did the bare minimum and let Gabriel's case fall through the cracks. On March 26, a therapist attached to Gabriel filed a report. This report stated that Gabriel had been forced to perform oral sex on a relative. This claim was barely looked into, and when Gabriel was asked about it, of course, Pearl was standing right next to him, making sure that he had the correct answers. Could no one see what was happening? This boy was covered in bruises, busted lips, noticeable scratches, and broken bones. Clearly something was wrong, but no one cared enough to help this poor boy. 1 week before the tragic events of today's case took place, another report was made. This time, a teacher from Gabriel's school decided to call the sheriff's department. However, when he went to the house to check out the situation, no one was there. He had been given the wrong address. He was able to get into contact with Pearl, who said that Gabriel was no longer living with them. He was now in the custody of Pearl's grandmother. That was a blatant lie, but the police officer took her word for it. I want everyone watching to be aware of this fact. Over 60 complaints were filed against Pearl Fernandez and Isaro Aguirre. Both LA County Child Protective Services and the Department of Children and Family Services looked into these claims. Gabriel Fernandez had only lived with his mother and Isaro for 8 months. All of this occurred within less than a year. On May 22nd, 2013, Pearl called 911. Gabriel wasn't breathing after being hit in the head. The paramedics rushed over to the home and saw something much worse. Gabriel had obviously done more than hit his head. He was on the ground, completely naked and covered head to toe in bruises and cuts. One first responder said that it was the worst child abuse case that she had ever witnessed in her entire career. The emergency team rushed Gabriel to the hospital and realized just how bad his condition was. Gabriel's skull was cracked, he had multiple broken ribs, and they found BB pellets lodged into his body. Isaro told the paramedics that Gabriel was gay as though that had anything to do with the injuries that he'd faced. The doctors did everything in their power to save him, but 2 days later, Gabriel Fernandez was pronounced brain dead. It took 2 days to complete an autopsy on Gabriel's body, which is an unusually long time. There were multiple different injuries that needed to be looked into, and this poor child was covered head to toe. The examiner concluded that Gabriel's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, compounded with neglect and malnutrition. On May 23rd, Pearl and SRO were arrested. Pearl was arrested for child endangerment, and SRO was arrested for attempted murder. On May 24th, once Gabriel was pronounced lifeless, both were charged with first-degree murder with unique circumstances of torture. During the trials, various witnesses testified to Gabriel's abuse during his 8-month period living with Pearl and SRO. The evidence was clear to see. Both of them teamed up against an innocent, defenseless boy and beat him until they killed him. SRO's defense team claimed he was a good, kind man who had never had any run-ins with the law before meeting Pearl. She was the real mastermind behind the plan to torture her son and not him. SRO pleaded not guilty to the charges against him, denying that his initial motive was based on homophobia. On November 14th, 2017, the jury deliberated and found SRO guilty of first-degree murder and circumstances of torture. The following month, the sentencing trial was held to determine if he would get life in prison or the ultimate penalty. The jury was deadlocked, but eventually concluded that SRO deserved the ultimate penalty. SRO was placed in the San Quentin State Prison on June 13th, 2018 at 37 years old. He is still awaiting his execution date. Now for Pearl. On February 15th, 2018, Pearl pleaded guilty to her charges in order to avoid the death penalty. Instead, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In June of 2018, at 34 years old, Pearl was admitted into the Central California's Women's Facility. In 2021, she requested a resentencing, but was denied as she was not entitled to resentencing relief. I agree. In court, Pearl apologized for her actions. I want to say I'm sorry for what happened. I wish Gabriel was alive. Every day I wish that I would have made better choices. I'm sorry to my children. I want them to know that I love them. It breaks my heart for the other 3 children that have to grow up without a mom, but I'm glad that they're no longer in that scary, abusive household. I can't imagine how every day that they were terrified, watching your sibling get treated in such a way. It's got to scar you to be up next. That's an awful upbringing, but I hope that they can heal from this heavy, heavy trauma. The social workers and the supervisors attached to Gabriel's case were fired and charged with child abuse and falsifying records and potentially face up to 11 years in prison. They minimized the severity of the situation and allowed Pearl and SRO to get away with the violent acts. However, the charges were ultimately dropped because their failure to uphold their duties was not the direct cause of child abuse. I understand that they're not entirely to blame, but there was a complete lack of action on their end. After 60 complaints to your office, you would think that you would buck up and do something. The system is entirely broken. They allowed their carelessness to get in the way, and now a child is dead. This case was particularly challenging to cover, as I'm sure you can imagine. No child deserves to be treated that way, especially not in their own home. Gabriel was a kind, lovable kid who just wanted to be close to his family. He had so much life ahead of him. That's all I have for you today. Until next time, stay safe out there and hug your kids extra tight. Sending all my love to Gabriel's family. Thanks for watching. I'm Danny. This has been Killer Bites.